Hello again. This is Sam speaking, and here's a continuation of our stock um, sort of rundown on what we do with stock images. As you can see, I went ahead and I made some changes to the stock I had picked out before. Here's a great example of what you can actually do with stock images once you find them. This is why we're not too worried about how exactly our stock image lines up. And this is also why we want to choose a vector file, because those are more readily accessible for edit. So you can see this vine. Here's the original. Very simple. But you can also tell, you can clearly see this is supposed to emulate a chalkboard. And the quality of colors and lines on this raw vector file doesn't really match. So there are actually things you can do to help improve texture, appearance, and help pull your image together into something more cohesive instead of just a bunch of parts put together. So I'm choosing to use this flower, this hibiscus, to underline exactly what I'm doing to edit the stock image files and make them more native. This is the raw hibiscus flower. It's another piece of stock imagery I found earlier on Vecteezy. Just a plain black flower, which is just honestly the perfect canvas, changing the color, changing its texture. It really makes a difference to use a nice clean template, or starting off period, I should say. So what I'm going to do, because I know this customer wants this particular item to be NAU themed, and their colors are yellow and blue. So I'm going to choose one of those colors for this hibiscus flower. It doesn't really matter what color I choose to go with at first, because colors are, of course, easily changeable. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the yellow. Going to make my vector the color I'd like it to be. And then from there, I'm going to go to Effect, Artistic. And what I'm looking for is something to really roughen the inner portions of this flower. I want there to be a fill texture instead of just messing with the edges. And we will make it to the edges, but I do feel as though starting with the overall fill and then working your way out, instead of doing it in reverse, can have a much better cohesive result. So for this one, I'm going to choose Rough Pastels, since that will emulate the look of a rough drawing, I should say. Chalk and pastels are roughly similar in terms of a dry media being smudged against a dry substrate. So what I'm going to do for this, once you select that effect, this is just a preview stage. The effect has not actually been applied to the live vector, as you can see. But this preview page gives you a bit of a heads up, I should say, on what it's going to look like at the current settings. So what I would like to do is really bring out that rough texture. This arm is tired. Switching hands, so I'm going to scale that relief pretty high, and as you can see, the texture is really brought out a little bit more. So keep my camera on here so you can see the difference in real time. I set the relief down to 2, and now I've set it to 48. I'm really liking that texture right there. And it's not exactly what I'm looking for quite yet, but it's a great first start. So I'm gonna click OK. And clicking OK makes that texture live. It's a little bit smaller in here, so you can't see it quite as well as we did on our preview page. But, and since I'm still on the eyedropper tool, I accidentally made that flower gray when I didn't want it to be. But you can see where we are now. So that's a little bit textured, a little bit better for our purposes. I could put it onto the design, but I feel like there's a couple more things we can do to make this really pop. So I'm going to select it, and I'm going to select my brush tool. And I've already been in here before, but I'm going to show you what I did. So with brushes, once this window is open and your item is selected, you're going to go to Library. You're going to go to Artistic, and you're going to go to Artistic Charcoal Pencil. And that'll bring up a whole library of different textures or different charcoal and chalk-based brush strokes. Excuse me, I had to get a little bit of water. And honestly, you can just play around with these if you're not sure which one to use. Since I've already been in here and I already have a general idea of which brush I want to use, I will go ahead and select it. A thick pencil. Oops, forgot one thing. I was supposed to set that stroke. There it is. And that stroke, I am going to choose a little bit of a darker color so we can see. Yeah, since this is a chalk drawing, you can really see the difference, adding that darker color around it. Really wanted to emulate a drawing, you know, someone scribbling on there. We're gonna go back to our panel, our appearance panel, I should say. And we're gonna choose our stroke, effects, distort and transform, roughen. So when this happens, you have this window pop up, and it does give you your preview so you can see what's happening. I've already set the settings that I want to use for this design, but just to give you a heads up, you can change the settings a little bit, and once you get it to where you want it to be, go ahead and click OK. Don't be afraid to make changes as you go. I decided just now that I don't really like that color stroke. It's a little bit too saturated, so I'm gonna go in. Nope. Make sure it's selected. Select this. See, it's a little bit too red for me, for my taste personally. So I'm gonna go ahead and make it a little bit less saturated. It's hard to see it on camera. Made it a little too less saturated. It's okay to make edits as you go. And there we are. I'm going to set it against the backdrop so I can see how it looks. I can't really make too many more changes with just one hand, So I'm gonna go ahead and set this flower as well as a blue version of what I just worked on in this design. Bring everything together, and then from there I'll send it off to proof. I hope this was illuminating, and I hope it helps you with your own future designs.